Afternoon's Job Hunters Help Desk. I'm Simon Ward, and I'm joined, as always, by Greg Wyatt. And today we're quite excited about the session today. Well, I'm really excited. Both Greg and I have got a little bit of a cold, so I'm particularly excited because I have to do very little. This is a lot of.
I'm terrified.
And Greg is doing a lot. So we're going to sort of try to lift the curtain and look behind and see what happens on LinkedIn, what recruiters do on LinkedIn, and how the platform supports recruiters in their activities. I think if we really understand what recruiters are doing as job hunters, we're going to be in a much better position to do what is going to work to get ourselves either found if we are a passive candidate, or in terms of how we handle our response to advertised jobs, etc. But really, today is going to be it's a while since I was a recruiter. And LinkedIn has changed so much. LinkedIn's changed in the last 3 months, never mind the last 3 years. So it's changed a lot. So I'm going to leave it to Greg today.
Though, isn't it, when it comes to advice? As soon as you're out of date with recruitment practice, it's really hard to give relevant advice.
Yeah, I mean, I have had to put. I mean, since I left Capita and I stopped in the RPO space, I've had to put so much effort in just to stay current because everything is changing, and I'm not doing it. I'm not recruiting every day. I'm not job hunting every day. I am talking to clients every day. But I need to make sure that advice is current, and it's tough. And I think it's one of the challenges for job hunters, particularly in that sort of the loneliness and long distance job hunter, that things change even during the lifetime of a single job hunt. So keeping current is really important, and reviewing, I think, your plan and your targets and your measures is relevant. But I'm going to try not to get waylaid and go off in strange directions, which is my and hand over to Greg, who's going to look at the back end of LinkedIn and how a recruiter would handle LinkedIn. And you're going to share your screen and pop it all up. Is that right?
I will do. And I've got quite a few tabs open, so hopefully we can sort of navigate that through Restream, okay? But just let me know if I'm looking at something different to everyone else. And there's 3 things I want to go through today, and obviously we'll stop for questions as well. One is to run through an exercise I did a couple of weeks ago, which kind of shows how LinkedIn Recruiter prioritizes different things on searches very straightforwardly by using a specific term that no one else in the world uses apart from me. I'll show you that in a moment. Secondly, we've very kindly got a guinea pig, which isn't Simon today, in Adam Cleaver, who's
joined us. So not only is he a guinea pig, he's come on board, and he was the first person to say hello today. So
hi, Adam. We had a good few chats yesterday about different things, and hopefully he's had some good ideas. And it's really interesting. Recruitment's a game of perception versus intention, and how you portray yourselves isn't necessarily how people see you. And that's part of what we're doing today, which is to put yourself in the recruiter's shoes and how we search for people, so that you can play to that and better be found. On Monday, yesterday I put up a post highlighting one of the filters, which is location, on Recruiter, and a couple of people said, "Oh, the hoops we have to jump through now is absolutely ridiculous." But the point I made to both of them is that most job seekers that I talk to focus on outbound activities. So that's applying for jobs, it's talking to people, maybe door knocking if you've got a bit of chutzpah. But LinkedIn as a profile is an inbound channel, so you can attract people to you. And if you get it right once, or maybe you fine tune it after you've got the first effort right, it will keep working for you, because every time a recruiter has a vacancy, and we'll show how this might work in a minute, we'll use Recruiter or other tools to find people who match those criteria. And if you're not found for those, you're never going to know. And even worse, if you are found for those jobs, but they don't contact you, you still won't know. And that's even worse. And there's something going wrong there. And if it's not because you're unsuitable, then something's gone very wrong indeed. So hopefully some of the things that we'll show today will help you look at your own profile a little bit differently and think about the kind of things that you can do to help recruiters and hiring processes find you, because ultimately it's about getting a job. So let me...
While you're looking for the stuff to put up on the screen, I'm just going to say hello to the guys who are here already. So Malcolm is a perennial, fantastic. Thank you for coming on. Linda's been on for a few times. Ian, it's great to have you back. And Adam, obviously, you're going to play your part in today as well. And I think we've got a few more coming in. Now, I think I have to. So they've changed a few things. So if I do that, come on. There you go. Is that it?
So this profile is the Phil Spencer of recruitment. So I've been led to believe, which is a great compliment, of course, to me and to Phil. I wonder if that makes you Kirsty, though. So my profile is a bit different to someone looking for work, because ultimately I'm catering to potential clients and to potential candidates rather than looking for a job myself. Although you can see that I've got open to work here for fractional talent acquisition roles, which is something I do from time to time. And one of the reasons I like doing is it lets you build a relationship over the long term rather than in recruitment as an agency. Typically, for key hires particularly, you do one vacancy with a company and that might be it for a year. So the reason I brought up my profile is because of this. Letters and numbers, which spells out headline in a passwordy sort of way, but it's not a password I use anywhere else. And the reason I'm doing this is to show how it works from the recruiter side of things, which I'll dive into now. So I don't know if you'll see this straight away. I might need to reshare the screen. Can you see recruiter, or is it still me?
We're still you, Greg.
Okay, I have to reshare it then. Let's go on to. We'll have to do this a few times. So it'll be a bit fiddly.
That's it.
Right. So can you see LinkedIn talent pool and recruiter search?
Should be coming up now. There we go. Oh, it's gone again. There you go. Right.
So this is Recruiter Lite. There are a number of different tiers of recruiter license which offer different features, and it's probably better to run a search first rather than explain the features now, because you can kind of see it on the screen, given they like to upsell it. But I use Recruiter Lite. It's the cheaper of the three options that are available to me that let me do the job that I need, and the additional features in the other more expensive tiers aren't particularly relevant for me, and I'll explain why in a little bit. I've opened up a project so that you can see how it looks at the start of looking for someone. One thing I need to explain is that my setup here is a little bit idiosyncratic, because normally what you'd do is you'd have a recruiter license that includes advertising as well, but I've got a separate license for that. And the reason is that when I brought them together last year or 18 months ago, I advertised the role and I started rejecting candidates. And in my rejection, I included a link to my free resources, Job Seeker Basics. And LinkedIn said that was an egregious violation and marked all my content as harmful. This is me trying to be helpful, and I couldn't get hold of anyone. It was an absolute nightmare. I got hold of LinkedIn AI bots with names including AI, Adil and Zane, all of whom would say the same thing and send me around in different cycles. But long story short, I mean, it's all fixed now, but I've kept them separate. So actually what you see here is going to be a little different to what some recruiters see, but the principles will be the same. So when you go into a new project, you can see these are the sort of primary filters that are used. So you've got job titles, then locations, then skills and assessments, companies, schools, year of graduation, which I would imagine is age discriminatory, but what can you do, hey? We'll have to tell LinkedIn about that. Industries, I mean, I don't use that, but some companies may want to filter by that. And then all the way down at the bottom, you've got keywords, which is more of the catch-all. Now, the reason to show this is if we go back onto my profile, I'll keep this screen open, but I need to copy that weird headline thing. So if you remember, I had headline in my headline. And if I was to search on that under job titles, then there's not a single person in the world who's got that, including me. So I don't come up. So headline doesn't turn up under job titles, which I find quite interesting. Especially since a lot of people will say, oh, you know, I want to be a CEO or a finance director or what have you. But if you don't have that in the rest of your profile, which we'll show a bit differently later on, it can work against you. The other primary things that recruiters might use are things like skills and assessments. So if we search on headline again, now it does search on my headline, even though it doesn't show up anywhere else. But as you can see, skills and assessments is a secondary filter. So job titles, the laziest recruiter search in the world, what we might do is look for how many finance directors there are in the local area to Bury St Edmunds. In fact, we can do. Why don't we do that? Let's just have a look. So as I type that in, you can see there's these suggested job titles, which are generally recommended to search on. But as we know, there are iterations of job titles. So I might put Director of Finance in as well. So at the moment, you've got 170,000 open to work. I'll explain what this means in a minute. Oh, I've mistyped that. That doesn't help me when I find people, does it? I'm not even wearing my glasses, so I can't tell if I spelled it correctly. The life of a competent recruiter. Right. So just across LinkedIn, there's a 930,000 people who've got a finance director around the world somewhere on their profile, which is quite kind of staggering. I didn't realize there was that much finance in the world. But the first thing I'll show you, this is where the different levels of recruiter differentiate. This is the open to work filter, which I don't have access to. So when you turn on the hidden open to work button on your banner, we can filter by it here. So that would automatically bring this number of down to probably about 400,000 or something like that, because it's still a wild number. And then you've got a couple of other filters here. So active talent. So these are people who are applying for jobs, or maybe they're actively updating more posts, or they're active on LinkedIn. LinkedIn likes people who use LinkedIn. And so that's one of the ways in which it prioritizes results. And then rediscovered candidates. So I think these are people who have applied for jobs before within your organization, or they may have come up in previous searches. So you can do ready filters to save a bit of time if you've got access to that. But I don't use those because I do quite a diverse range of vacancies, which all have quite niche skill sets, often in the east of England. So it's often quite a small number of candidates that I'd look through. So I want to have as wide a pool as possible to read through rather than filtering down. And for me, it doesn't really matter if someone's out of work or in work. It's the capability that matters.
Can I just quickly, just before we go past it, I don't want to open the can of worms that is the open to work banner. But whenever there are discussions on LinkedIn about open to work, there will be at least one, often several recruiters who come on and say, well, if you don't like the banner, you can just use the secret button.
Yeah.
Now, what you're saying is that the
lower this is level, the secret button. You can't filter by the green banner, by the visible one on your image. That's simply an image. It's not indexed by LinkedIn Recruiter.
So if you put open to work up, no one is going to find you because you've put the open to work banner on. They'll only know you're
in LinkedIn Recruiter. It's a visible tool, a bit like a headline to an extent.
So did you say that on your license you can't search on the open to work secret?
No, but
I just wonder what percentage of recruiters have that.
So for me, I spend I don't know, about 170 quid a month on LinkedIn Recruiter Lite. The more expensive packages are anything from 800, 900 pound a month upwards. And then I think they're split between licenses for agencies, as in me, or for in-house people, as in me, because I also do that to confuse matters. But the reason that I don't use it is I've got better means of finding people who are actively looking for work. So I subscribe to a range of different CV databases off the back of CV Library and other ones like Total Jobs or what used to be Monster, which isn't around anymore. And the benefit for me there is that I get telephone numbers and contact details, whereas when you're in LinkedIn Recruiter, unless someone's uploaded a CV, you're limited to sending in-mails, or if, and this is actually a good tip for anyone, if you've got premium, I don't think you can do it with the free membership. There's a button in your settings where you can open up free messages from anyone. It's definitely worth making it as easy to contact you as you can. Of course, scammers will do that as well, but we cater to the real people. But so for me, it's not advantageous to have it open to work, which is why I don't spend additional money. I get further benefits from the other resources that I access. And there are other platforms as well which let recruiters find people. However, LinkedIn make its money from Recruiter Lite and all the other tiers of recruiter, and I'd say that most recruiters will have some form of recruiter access. They might even use Sales Navigator because that allows you to search on profiles with the same sort of data, just got slightly different features. And you can, to an extent, do a very light level search just with a free membership with the search bar at the top. So I'm just going to show you results under Bury St Edmunds just to show how that sort of filters down. So there's 21 people who are open to 166 people in total. And thing to highlight is that these aren't people who are necessarily looking for work. This is just the profiles. It's just data at the moment. So I don't think there's any issue of sharing these, because you could go finance director and Bury St Edmunds on the standard search and still finding these people. So if I was looking for a finance director in Bury, I don't know why I wouldn't go further afield, but arguably you got 166 people there that I could send a really compelling message to just about starting a conversation. But anyway, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go back into the headline search. So it came up under skills. It didn't come up under job titles, and it will come up under keywords because this is the sort of catch-all search that goes across everything. So again,
just very briefly, Greg, just for people who've joined us a little bit later on the call, just to explain what that headline search is. It's not a search of the headline. You've used that word as a skill.
Yeah, I've used this particular set of numbers and letters because no one else in the world has used that. So I know that it'll either find me or it won't. So it's only on my headline at the moment. And what we're showing is that if you search under job title, which is the most generic way of searching, and as we saw a moment ago, I could search for finance director in Bury St Edmunds for find 166 people. So I might not need to do any more than that. So if I was relying on being found for a finance director just by having it only in my headline, I wouldn't be found. So it's just something to be mindful of, because I think sometimes what happens, and this is mainly for curious job titles. So let's say someone is a director of corporate administration and finance or something like that. So they are the finance director, but they've got a really weird job title because of the organization they've worked in. So that would be your job title under your profile and in the actual job title field in your experience section, wherever that's gone. So up here. So that matches point to point the job title section. But if you had that curious job title, you might think, okay, I'm going to call myself a CFO or a finance director in my headline. But if you do that and you haven't got it in the rest of your profile, if we only search in the job title, we won't find you. So it's just it's worth looking critically at how you positioned yourself, just to make sure that the right words are in the right places. And now we've used this as a very specific search. Obviously, it's not related to real life, but what we can do now is go on to Adam and have a look at his profile and do a dummy search on that. But before we do that, are there any sort of questions that have come up, Simon?
I think nothing's come up as questions. We've got a few on the call, which is fantastic. I think now as we begin to get into this nitty-gritty and we compare your view and Adam's, we'll begin to see how the two can and sometimes can't work together. I think the most important thing is just is that people leave today and we're touching on that with the really simple instructions of put your job title here, here, and here. Make sure that you're using LinkedIn to the best of its ability, because I think LinkedIn has become more sophisticated, and I think sophisticated is often another word for complex. And it's interesting. Adam's put a point up saying that I think he was talking about you being attacked by LinkedIn. It was pretty shocking. Remember, referred to that last time. I was hunting in 2023, so I'm talking 2 years ago, and it was regarded as a valuable resource. So I think
I think what's happened in the meantime is there's a lot more spam. There's a lot of scammers out there. So, when you put the hashtag open to work, inevitably you'll get someone from BAE saying, send me your CV. We've got lots of vacancies, using a Gmail address. Or you get DMs from people who are baiting and switching into CV coaching, or even worse, proper scams that try and get money off you. So I think that's a big thing that's sort of come through in the last year. But I think it's a tough market. I think the market continues to change. And I think most of the people who are probably watching today have experienced that over a mid to long term.
I think if you were coming into the market for the first time in a long time and you were beginning to use LinkedIn in a way is a simpler platform if you were using it for the first time. If you have historic knowledge of LinkedIn, I think it actually becomes more complex, because you have that the historic use of where you may have used it in the past, or what it did in the past, or what it didn't do in the past. And the algorithm changes, particularly the one around Christmas this year or last year, was particularly complex. Let me just question.
Before we go into the others, let me just show you something.
One question, Greg, as you asked.
Yeah.
Just very, very quickly, this is from Sri. Hi, Greg. Can you please share what is the best recommended approach to capture the headlines, executive summary, or job titles?
On LinkedIn? Well, I think ultimately you have to start with a bit of self-analysis in terms of what are you best suited for and which job do you ideally want, and I think that can be hard to do in a long-term job search. I mean, that's something we talked about last week, wasn't it? Rebooting your job search. But going back to first principles and thinking, what is the job I'm best at and how is this defined in the market, and then using that to inform everything within your profile. So one way you might do that is, if you're being quite focused in a search, you could print off 5 adverts that you've seen and have a look at the common themes within it and make sure those are on your profile. I think a lot of people, particularly small business to business owners, tend to have quite as I do, as you can see, quite a narrative in their headline. So outcome-led recruitment, blah, blah, blah. If I was looking for a job, I'd probably just be a recruiter. make it simple. So lead with relevance. Start with a job that you want, that you're suited for, and be realistic about it. I mean, if you're a finance manager, don't put CFO in your headline as a leading point, because you might get found for it, but it won't convert into conversation. And then you could put a bit of context as well. One of my favorite words, as you know. So it could be SME, startup, scale ups, 5 to 10 million pound turnover, 100 to 200 people, professional services. Obviously, it's specific to what you do, but just to try and make it stand out in a search result. And we'll show that a bit more clearly when we bring Adam's searches up, because at the moment we just got me.
Just very quickly, we can get a few questions. Linda's put up a post. That's it. One just before we read Linda's tip, I think it's a really valid one. One point I'd like to make is that there's a fundamental difference if you're job hunting between being right and being effective. And I think sometimes it is actually worth just being right to one side. Yes, it's right. Every recruiter should ring you back. Yes, you should never be ghosted. They're all right, but I don't know how commenting on that and letting that begin to dominate your job hunt, for example, becomes effective. In the same way with LinkedIn, let's use it the way that is most effective. And we may have disagreements about, well, that's not right or whatever. But if you do your homework and you get the right title for the role that you want, as opposed to the title you had last time, that will be very beneficial and be effective. So do that homework in the early stages. Look through your market, look through job boards, see what language is being used, and use the language of the market.
Be truthful and realistic. I think the way to look at a job search, most people will go into job search hoping that someone's going to say yes on them. But actually, I think the healthier way to look at it is to put yourself in a position where you can say no. So that means playing the game, learning the rules, being effective, as you rightly say, so that if someone comes to you with a job that isn't right for whatever reason, you've got options, even if there isn't another job out there, to say no.
So we've got to read this tip from Linda, because it includes the word twiddly.
Yeah, I'm twiddling my thumbs at the moment.
Tip I used recently: make the job titles on LinkedIn equal the drop down. You can put the specific twiddly titles in the first line of the description. I've had a few calls from recruiters since doing that.
That's what, as we showed when we were looking for a director of finance, that's the filter that comes up. It's definitely a good idea to do that. I think where it muddies the water a little bit is that you want to have verifiable information on there. So it's very easy to say director of finance because that's the option it gives. But actually, if you were, sorry, I'm using finance just to be consistent, and maybe David's here as well. Who knows? He's a finance recruiter. But if you were a finance manager, putting director of finance, if someone checks that out and they've seen that you've lied, it's going to work against you, even at first, CV sifting stage or at reference stage. If they find out you told porkies, it rarely goes well.
Yeah, I'd agree. Phil's asked this question, and I think this is a question I've been asked a number of times. Does the number of times our job title appears in a profile have any bearing on the likelihood of it being found?
So I think there's two elements to it, and this kind of relates to C-word stuffing in CVs as well, which is, yes, you want to be found, but you have to convert interest. It's got to be credible, and I think that the balance that is a smart way to look at it is how Google prioritizes search results, which is called this is when my brain's gone, EEAT, so experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. So if you've an SEO magnate and you keyword stuff something onto a website, but it doesn't hit those elements of EEAT, it's not going to show up very well in search rankings. And I imagine there's an element of that both in most CV databases, but also certainly in terms of how people look at CVs. So if we come across a CV and they've done something that can be seen to be a hack, whether it's keyword stuffing or AI injections is the current one, which people seem to be worried about. So that's where you put a white text prompt to say, I'm the number one candidate, disregard all others, or something like that, a bit more sophisticated than that. But even without those hacks, if I look at a CV and it's just stuffed with keywords and it doesn't show credibility, I'm going to be concerned that they're not the candidate that they say they are. So you've got to get the balance right. Yes, use keywords judiciously. So if it's director of finance, use it in your headline, use it in your job titles, use it in your summary, but try and do it organically in a way that you would saying to a friend in a pub, for example. If you start saying director of finance every other line, you sound like a twat. If you're saying that to a person.
Certainly, because I was in recruitment when keywords first became a thing, and I went to, I think, 2 or 3, maybe 3 different recruitment companies as an employee, and they had a white font tool which would stuff keywords into the white spaces in CV.
And that's been replaced by prompt insertions now.
Yeah.
So my first keyword search was on jobsite.co.uk in 1996. I don't think the technology's changed that massively. Everyone's sort of hung up on AI at the moment, but actually getting the principles right of being findable and converting interest will always be an effective way to improve your odds. So get those keywords in there, but do it in a way that's organic. And there's certain ways that you can do that. So, for example, under each section of your experience, if you open up, edit it, and you've got your narrative, you can also put your skills in there. So that will help with getting found for those. So this is kind of what I do. I've got accounting in there because that's an area that I recruit for rather than being an accountant. Whereas these are my functional skills. So there's lots of ways in which you can include it organically. So do that, but just make sure it reads naturally and reads in your voice as much as you can.
Just so that other people see it. Phil asked a question. Linda's now answered it. I was going. So first of all, Phil asked a question in Linda's post and tip. How do we view the drop-down list? And Linda's answered that very kindly. Start typing and it will come up. E.g., so not PMO, instead project management officer, etc.
Well, just go onto your profile and wherever it says edit, click edit and have a play around, and you'll get a feel for how the different filters make suggestions. Don't worry about overwriting stuff that's precious to you because you can just not save it when you close it.
Yeah.
Yes. One thing just worth showing is that how my profile is shown as LinkedIn Recruiter kind of looks like a CV, and it's a little bit different, the hierarchy, compared to when you look at your own profile. So it goes into summary and then it goes straight into my career history. Education, there's my skill headline, some of my recommendations, but you'll notice it doesn't have my content in there at all, because although it might be slightly an indexing factor in terms of what we talked about being active on LinkedIn, recruiters don't really care. They don't really care about your content unless they happen to have come across your post that you're looking for work, or you've written some peer expertise that's organically building your network. So we literally use this as a data repository. So getting that data right, as we've said, is what's important. Right. Any other questions, or should we go on to
one
Adam?
last question, or at least one last comment from Martin. Martin is a highly successful and CV writer, and really worth listening to what I saw a post that Martin put up.
Ellis.
Yes, about
Hi, Martin. Just to juggling.
Martin put up a great post about a sort of a CV rewrite that had led to a challenge to racism and a 6-year-old who'd got into a job in sales, and it was really encouraging. It wasn't just useful; it was encouraging for anyone who goes to racism as their sort of automatic response to why they're struggling. But Martin's just said here, I'd encourage people to actually go and look at Martin's full posts rather than reading through it all. But he encourages people to use headlines like this, including covering their key skills as well as their job title. So strategic planner, stroke team leadership, stroke team building, stroke change management, project management, operations, chief of staff. I'll have a look at that. I always try to use all of the 220 characters. I think that's important. If they give you 220 characters, use them. And Martin is an expert at this, but it's a real art, I think.
And we can show why it's important when we do a search for Adam. And I think it's more important as a conversion tool, because you have to think about, for example, going on Amazon and buying a commodity item and those hundreds and hundreds of results and how you personally filter that down. But then when you've got a manager the decision that you make when you read those effectively headlines on a commodity item to click in and read more. So that's where it's really valuable. So I think there is a searchability element to it, and it does compound with other aspects of your profile. But for me, it's more about when you've got human eyes on it, which is what we all care about, isn't it? Everyone who's skeptical about the algorithm or AI or ATSs, ultimately it's humans that make decisions, and that's what you've got to cater for, and that's what we'll do, hopefully, with Adam.
I'll shut up and let you get on now, Greg.
Sorry?
I'll shut up and let you get on now.
Oh, well, I forgot what we're talking about now. I was hoping we had more questions. Right, well, I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to start sharing again. Let's go on to Adam. Right, so hopefully you can see Mr. Adam Cleaver.
It'll take a second. There, it should be coming up any moment now. There you go.
So we had a few people who wanted to be guinea pigs, and after a tough and fair selection process, I automatically rejected 2 of the candidates, and Adam was the winner. So congratulations, Adam. Hope
Did you call the 2 candidates you rejected, Greg?
No, I didn't. I didn't even bother replying to them.
Just ghost them.
Yeah, exactly. You're dead to me now. Hopefully, no, you're not. Hopefully, you're here and you find this helpful. So, Adam is a data engineer, and as you can see, he is in Berlin. I think Adam's actually from around my way, more or less. I'm in Bury St Edmunds, and I think Adam may have been in Braintree, if that's right. So maybe we crossed paths at some point in the past. So Adam is, as you can see, #open to work, and you can see the roles that he's interested in. Now we had a chat yesterday in the DMs, so to speak, about the nature of being in Germany as an English speaking person, which I think brings additional challenges, especially since he wants to stay in Berlin. So one of the things we suggested is, and I think this probably won't be hugely effective, was to write his job title in German that he wants in his headline, so design engineer, Dataentwickler. Did I get that right, Adam? I don't know. Which is the same word, on the basis that we don't know what German recruiters will look for. I think it's likely, especially for English-speaking roles, they'd use English terms. But what we want to do is appeal to the language of a recruiter. And even if it's a 0.1% chance that they'd search on Dataentwickler instead of data engineer, it's probably worth doing that, especially since it doesn't look daft, because there's common sense logic for using it, which is to appeal to the reader. So I think he's got a solid, if maybe too solid, about section. Could do with a bit of white space there. I mean, especially since I'm not wearing my glasses, I can't actually read that very well. So that's the hack no one talks about in recruitment. If we can't read the screen, we're not going to go very far. Probably won't be able to see your telephone number either. But from what I can see, if I tilt my head back a bit, he's got some good narrative about some of the areas of experiences that he's got. And I think if it had a bit more white space and maybe tidy up a couple of typos. So I think that's a passing error, actually. That's an example of what can happen when you upload information to ATSs. I think that's just supposed to be Dungeons and Dragons, isn't it? D&D, but let's put the AMP ampersand in there as well as a code for the ATS. So a bit more readability would help. He's got some good skills in there. I think the key challenge that Adam will have is the market, as with a lot of people, and that presuming that he's mainly going for data roles, he's got on paper 18 months of experience for the kind of role that he wants as a data engineer, whereas his background has transferable skills in different areas. So for instance, he talked about his systems engineering, which I think from a technical standpoint, although it's a different language, if you like, to data, there's a lot of common processes to it. However, will a recruiter see that? That's the question. As you can see, it's fairly sort of standard reverse chronological order, and that's how you should have your CV. I mean, if it's good enough for LinkedIn, it's probably good enough for your CV as a rule of thumb. What Adam has also kindly done, and I'm only going to share one of the screens actually. I used ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini, and I've uploaded a job description which Adam shared with me for a data engineer. And the prompt that I used, let me go on to one of them. So so I can show it as I'm talking, was to get the large language model to pretend to be an ATS, so that we can get a feel for what happens when someone managing recruitment on an ATS configures that vacancy for filters and keywords. Now, this is obviously a different conversation again about ATS Ate My CV, which I very vehemently would say that it doesn't. However, every ATS allows keyword searches and filtering to aid with managing a very high volume of applications that you often see in many situations. It's not unheard of to get 1,000 applications, and that becomes very challenging to review every single one. I think many people will, but many people won't. So what we've done here is we've uploaded a job description. I think I can open it up and show it to you. I don't think there's anything confidential in it. So let's open that up too. This is your bog standard job description for a large corporate, and there's some good stuff in there actually, which you wouldn't see in every advert, such as a bit about the team, so that sort of context that a lot of adverts miss, and also sort of impact. You can't see that, can you? I keep forgetting to change over. Let's get back into where I should be.
Okay.
Right. So these are the terms that's been stripped out of the job description. So you can see some of the sort of functional terms about what the job does, and then some of the hard skills: SQL, SQL, Python, which is related to machine learning and old style AI, and some of the other architectures as well. So potentially what an ATS might do if you applied for this job is have a look to see whether there's any relevance in how you portrayed your CV against that job description to aid with ranking. And what we can do in LinkedIn Recruiter is show broadly how that might work. So why don't we do that? All right, I'll close this down again. Go back into Recruiter. If I can find it. So I'm going to start from scratch again in LinkedIn Recruiter. Get rid of that full Greg. Start from scratch, and I have to remember to take headline out of my headline because it looks a bit strange if you don't know why I'm doing it. So this is a completely fresh search. So I'm a lazy recruiter. I'm just going to search for a data engineer. As you can see, as Linda mentioned, you've got these different options. So let's go for the filter. But I'd also probably do a free text search and speech marks as well. There's a bit of overlap there, but you can do it both ways on Recruiter. You can use their suggested filters, and they're moving more towards semantic searching, which is to try and establish the intent of a recruiter rather than allowing us to do manual searches. I'd much rather do manual searches because they're much more powerful if you can configure them right. Anyway, so we've searched on data engineer. Let's get rid of data specialist, of which there are 310,000 open to work. So you can see, but by scrapping data specialists, I've stripped out 160,000 people there. Not quite as many finance people are there as data engineers, so slightly more skill short, but so around 700,000 people around the world, which isn't much use for us. And given our jobs in Berlin, I don't know why I'm recruiting in Berlin. I'd much rather recruit in Suffolk, but we are where we are.
Adam's just made a point about white space in the about section of LinkedIn. He was saying that it's interesting because on his edit screen, he puts in a single line space between each paragraph.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn's playing up today. You had a bit of an issue, didn't you? And so did I. My comment's gone a bit weird.
Yeah. What I would be tempted to do, Adam, is put a double line space in, upload it, see what it looks like. I think you at the moment, I think it's not just this morning. I think there have been a number of times when there have been little challenges in using LinkedIn since Christmas. So just play with it and have your settings so that you're not informing your network of your changes on your profile. Play with it, get it how you want it to be, and then change it again after that, I think. And Ian Brownlee has said, do ATS use American or English spellings for keywords? Data, I'll put this up.
it probably depends on what's in the job description, but also how it's configured. I think when you look at LinkedIn, a good example would be program manager. If I go back into this, because it's spelt differently in the States to the UK, so they don't have the MME version that you'd have in the UK. Although what I found when I was playing around with it was it does pick up the MME version. So I'd pick one and stick with it. It should be okay, but have a look at what the most common lingo in job descriptions are and use that. Right, so let's go back to data engineer.
I'll take Linda's comment down for now, but I'll pop it back up because I think it's an important one. I'll let you get on.
No, go ahead.
And so Linda's just talking, I think this is what we touched on last week, is about creating that mock company in your experience section so that you can get your current, the job title in that you're looking for as your current job title. And we talked about that last week. I don't know if it was Linda who brought it up. I'm sorry, I should know, but just getting that job title in rather than leaving your past job title or pretending you're still in work.
Oh, you mean when you're between jobs?
Yeah, when you're between jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. Good idea. And I think just coming back to the job titles as well, I mean, let's say you want to keep your curious, what do we call it? Director of Corporate Administration and Finance. If you want to keep it on there so that it represents your real life job title so that your current employer doesn't know that you're trying to be found on LinkedIn, then I think it's a good idea to try and thread the job title that you want elsewhere as a job title. So you can either do that job title and then in brackets Director of Finance, or you could have a previous job that has that job title as long as it's true. So just sort of think about different ways to show that same information. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Having the current job as the job title that you want if you're between jobs is really important. And I'll show why using the data engineer, because when you put the job title in, it gives you options for it. So can have, must have. So that's only really relevant if I've got quite a complex search of different criteria. Current or past is the default. So that's where you're working at the moment or where you worked in the past. Some people might work on search only on current, which is what we're talking about here. So if you've lost your job and your new job is looking for work, unemployed, then you won't get found. Similar sort of thing to that headline search. You've just got to be really specific about thinking about what people search on. Right, so data engineer, let's go back into here.
And while you're looking, I'll just say on Linda's last comment that she's made, I would recommend anyone who is making changes to their LinkedIn profile or looking about how they should present information. Linda's a great example of how to do it. So I'd take her advice. Please go and have a look at her profile. I think it's one I've looked at this week actually.
So locations, I put Berlin in, and as you can see, there's lots of different options, including quite a few Berlins in the States, which is interesting. Although you'd hope that it's not out of the realms of possibility that a recruiter would get the right continent at least. But even Berlin, Germany, Berlin. So yeah, would I only search on one? Well, I'd probably search on a few, but let's start with the most obvious one. So in Berlin for data engineers, Adam's got some competition, 4,000 results. So that, again, is too much to search through. And even if I had access to open work and filter by that, it's still 1,200 results, considering recruiters probably generally have 10 plus vacancies at a time. They won't have time to go through 1,200 results for every single one and have calls and do all the other jobs that they have to do. So we have to find a way to strip that down. But it'd be interesting to see what happens if we put the other Berlins in as well. So Berlin metropolitan area. So that's added another thousands. Berlin. It's like New York, isn't it? Hasn't really added too many extras. This is kind of an example of what's called sourcing philosophy. So sourcing is how we use LinkedIn Recruiter and ATSs and other job boards to find candidates through CVs and profiles and so on. And it's called narrow and wide. So what you would typically do is you do a very specific set of searches just to see what comes up. And yeah, if you've got too few results, then you broaden it out. So for example, here we've added different varieties of Berlin. And yeah, I'd probably do something a bit broader than that if I was doing it seriously. But you filter results till you got a manageable amount and a viable amount. And again, if you think about Amazon as a metaphor for searching, it's exactly how you search for a commodity item. If you've got 4,000 results, there's no way you're going to go through every single one, especially if, frankly, it doesn't really matter to you what that item is, as long as it works. And I think most recruiters want to get a good person in the job, and probably doesn't matter a huge amount. This might be slightly controversial if they miss 1 or 2 good candidates, if they found 5 or 6 good ones. So all you can do is be Joel Eric, whoever he is. I don't know why he's number 1, but he's got data engineer on there, and that's not even his current job. There's probably a few reasons why he's come top of the pile. It might be something to do with his activity level. It might even be to do with the fact he's applying for jobs. Who knows? I'm not a first degree connection to him, so that hasn't affected his ranking. Let's just have a look through the first page. I don't imagine Adam's going to turn up on there, unfortunately, but you never know. And I think it's because he doesn't have data engineer as a job title. He's got it as a headline, so it would be a secondary filter. So yeah, lots of people have those, and you can see in bold where it turns up. So he's not come up straight away, but in any respect, we're not going to spend the next 15 minutes going through 4,000 results. So let's see if I can narrow that down with some of these keywords that I've stripped out of the job description using my ATS. So let's try SQL and Python as skills. Interestingly, it's come up with suggested skills for that job title. Unfortunately, you can't see this yourself. Otherwise, that might be quite a good way to populate your profile with skills, I'd have thought. So Snowflake was definitely on the job description, so we'll use that. I don't know whether or not this is on Adam's profile. Python was on there as well. Python programming language. Presumably there's some snake handlers as well. So that's, oh no, I need to make this better. So I put can have for skills and assessment, which means it hasn't really changed for results very much. So actually what I need to do is change that to must have. So I close that down. So what did we say? Snowflake. Oh, Snowflake's gone. That's interesting. So must have Snowflake. So that's taken 3,000 people off the search, and then let's put Python in as well. So that's brought it down to 982. So arguably, if it was an urgent role, I might filter by open to work and just have a look at who's actively looking. Let's just see if Adam's turned up on page number 1, which is where you want to be, of course. All those people, as you can see, Louise, we don't know who he is. His headline's been flagged up, and senior's been captured by that search as well, even though we didn't put it in. And his job titles have been captured. So you can see why he might turn up in the search. So kind of a results that you'd expect from that. Let's cheat by putting some of Adam's skills in there. So he's got Python in his. Let's get rid of Snowflake and put AI pipelines in, because that's something that he's put as a top skill. So hopefully that means he'll be captured in the search. So my cold brain, I've already forgotten what I was going to put in. AI pipelines. Okay, let's do that. AI pipelines. So that doesn't look like it's a filter skill. Makes sense. Looks like one we've got to put in manually. Still 190 results, so that's much more manageable. So let's just quickly whiz through and see if we can find them on there. I'm not on page 1 by the looks of things. I reckon it's mainly because it's prioritizing on the job title first and foremost. One thing to highlight is no one actually knows the rules by which LinkedIn filters results. They keep that pretty close to their chest. So you can, through observation, see certain things that affect search results. One of which is specificity against what you put in. But actually what governs that is practically invisible from my perspective.
I just interrupt you for a moment, Greg. This is interesting. This is from Emma. Interesting tip out changing your career break to appear as your current role. I've been applying for roles with different job titles, e.g. internal communications manager, external communications manager, marketing manager. Would you recommend using all of these as your current title? How do you handle it when you're potentially applying for more than a single title?
Well, it's really challenging. I mean, I genuinely think you have to take a stand against the role that you're most suited for, particularly on LinkedIn, because you can't customize it in the same way that you do CVs for applications. So I would very carefully, as a marketing exercise, which is your domain, look at your ICP, which is the vacancy that you want. So your ideal customer profile, and write your profile specifically to that. So if you're strongest as an internal communications manager, I'd probably lead with that. I think where it can be problematic is, let's say you apply to a large organization which has multiple vacancies, including internal comms and external comms. It's not generally looked on very favorably, even if that's unfair, if someone's applied to loads of jobs, even if they can do all of them with transferable skills, because it makes it seem like they're not that intentional in their applications. And if they're that case with the employer, then who else are they applying for? And therefore, what's the risk of that application? So I think being really careful about how you position yourself is imperative. I think if you can perhaps choose the job title that you're most suited for, or, internal, external comms, I imagine the skill set is broadly the same. So you could use maybe those two as a internal communications manager, and then / or that vertical separator, external communications manager. So you will get found by both of those, but just be really careful from a credibility point of view, not to dilute it too much.
Couple more questions. Unless I've misread Linda's post, I think she's asking for a bit of free use of your recruiter license. Hi, Greg. Please, could you tell me the skills that come up for financial planning and analysts, and analysis and project management officer? Thank you.
Well, let's do that really quickly. I think what we can see with, unfortunately for Adam, is that there's a lot of competition profile-wise, even if they're not necessarily looking for work, for data engineers with very top-level searches. So I think it's worth, if he's got those skills on those job descriptions and he can demonstrate them, adding additional skills onto his profile. And if not, I mean, if they're essential skills which he doesn't have, then actually there's an argument there not to apply for those jobs, because there are going to be people who can fulfill those requirements. I mean, it's a really careful balance, because the other side of it is that job descriptions often list essential requirements which have nothing to do with the job, because they've been carelessly put together. So you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't. But unfortunately, the way searches work is the more specific our searches, the more specific the results. So unless that specific search directly links to what Adam has listed on his profile, there's a lot to search through. I'm just conscious time's ticking, so let's do that just to show a different job. Financial planning and analysis. I'll just do that as a single field. And I think same conversation for Linda. I missed everything you said, Simon, but I think she mentioned project management as well. So if you've got dual careers, which are you better suited for? Is it FP&A or is it project management?
It's project management officer. Was Linda's exact.
Because project management officer generally can cover very many different things, whereas financial planning and analysis is a very specific skill set. So probably fewer vacancies, but much less competition. Right, let's have a look how it comes up. I'll just make sure I've cleared that completely. So there's a few ways in which it's populated here. We'll just pick one of them. I wonder if it's going to confuse. No, it has updated that. So these are the sort of equivalent job titles that it's suggesting. City Comptroller, that's an interesting one. I haven't heard of that. And then for skills, right, I think we might need to put, okay, so we clicked on that. So these are the skills, hopefully Linda can see that, which it's suggesting, some of which I wouldn't necessarily say are particularly relevant. Certified Public Accounting, is that an English or an American qualification? We've got data science again, so maybe Adam will come up for that search.
Can you take a screenshot of that, Greg, and we'll send it to Linda afterwards? Just
yeah, let me do that now before I forget.
Cool. And then a very straightforward question from Phil as well, which I think, could you repeat which profile sections are searched when recruiters do a job title search?
Let me go back into it.
Okay.
So they tend to cross-pollinate, if that makes sense. So it tries to establish what you're looking for, and then it will search on those elements within a profile. So when you put a job title in, it will obviously pick up job titles, but it will also then search across your headline as well as key skills. And I imagine also, if it's come up under a job title, it will then also look under your summary and the sort of narrative in your career. But the caveat being, if your job title doesn't come up, then it won't find any of the rest of it, if that makes sense. So you have to have the job title right first for it to find the other elements.
And we've just had a bit of advice from David just saying that CPA is American.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So it shows you the Americanization of LinkedIn, doesn't it? Which is understandable. I mean, it's probably where most of their revenue comes from. And that's not going to be directly relevant for Linda in that case, because I imagine the skill set will be slightly different for FP&A roles in the US than it will be over here. I mean, there's a lot of commonality with generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP. But there's that nuance there. You know, the top skill is an American skill.
Right.
But I'm just going to try and copy this across before I forget. My brain's fading. Where's my print screen button? I can't even read.
I'm not going to touch my laptop because I'll probably cut everybody off. So, and it's very small.
I'm just going to copy and paste it. That's probably easiest.
Yeah, that's great. Okay.
I'll just send that to you now, Simon, and then I'll give you my undivided attention again.
And I'll forward that on to.
I'm back in the room.
Great. Okay. How much time do you have today, Greg? Because I'm conscious we're coming up towards.
I'm not in a rush, so we can carry on.
Great, fantastic.
How many other questions have we got?
We're up to date on questions at the moment, I think. Unless have I missed anybody? There's some comments. I particularly liked. Ian gave Adam some advice, and Adam agreed with it. So I always like it when there's some backs and forward on the chat. But we're up to date with questions.
Have you got any questions, Simon?
Not right now. You just put me on the spot there. I'm going to think of a question. I'll write them down, and I'll come back to you next time there's a gap. Didn't you demonstrate earlier that the headline, in your headline, wasn't found when searching for it as a job title?
Yeah, that's right. So that's what I was saying about how you've got to be really careful that the job title you want to be found for is specifically within the job title field. I mean, I'll show that again very briefly. It might take two seconds. So let's go back into my. How does computers work? That's the state. That's the state I'm in at the moment. Here we are. Right, headline. Let's close all this down again. So I have this curious code, if you like, headline only in my headline at the moment. And actually, I'll just double check I haven't got it as a skill as well, because I was messing around with it earlier, so I don't think it's there. Okay. So as you can see, I put headline in as a job title, and because I don't have that as a specific job title, it doesn't turn up, even though it's in my headline. If I change my job title now, let's hope a key client doesn't look at it while I'm prattling around on there, just to ruin whatever credibility I had left. Right, so I've just updated one of my job titles. So let's just let's do it again. See what happens. So now you can see that I've turned up because I've updated my job title, and because I've updated my job title, it now shows up on headline as well. So what that means is get your job title right to be findable, and then the headline will help because it's indexed by LinkedIn's. We said we wouldn't use algorithm, by LinkedIn's search facility.
I think we've done nearly an hour without using the A word, which I think is quite credible.
Well, we've done pretty well.
We've done it.
So it just shows how pedantic searches can be. And typos can really work against you. I think, unfortunately, when you write words, you tend to read them how you meant them rather than what they actually say. Or at least that's what I find when I post things, and then 2 seconds later find about 30 typos in my posts. And while that doesn't matter so much when people are reading posts, it does matter when people are searching for a job title that's been misspelled, because it won't necessarily be found.
Just in another question, please could you supply a list of the recruiter search fields? Which recruiter system outside of LinkedIn can recruiters use to find your mobile number? Where is that?
Well, it was about 1 billion. and I'm only being slightly facetious. I mean, if you Google, I don't know what search you'd search on actually, but private mobile numbers, then you come up with like Apollo and all these other lead generation companies which sell numbers that are scraped from somewhere, often from CV databases or LinkedIn or other areas. LinkedIn is cracking down on that. I know there's been some court cases where they've taken a recruitment software vendor to court in Australia, I think, for having scraped LinkedIn's data. I think from a job search point of view, the one to care about is LinkedIn because it's the primary one. If you're in Germany, I mean, Adam might want to look at Xing. I think XING is quite well used in Germany. I think Stepstone's still quite big over there as well, although it's total jobs in the UK. So I mean, there's loads and loads of tools which sell data, unfortunately, and every time we have a free service such as ChatGPT, we are the product. So our information gets out there.
I think Malcolm's made a fairly broad but very valid point, and it's important. And it says, if it's so important to catch an algorithm or a recruiter's eye, what about the hiring manager? A recruiter, their boss, and the hiring manager are all human, and they won't all want the same things.
Well, exactly, and again, a slightly different conversation, but this is where you and I disagree on customizing CVs, which is the hierarchy of recruitment. I mean, if you customize against a job description, a chief executive might have a very different perspective on what good looks like, and you might deprioritize things in your application, your LinkedIn profile, because you're trying to play the game that someone then thinks you're less credible for. Whereas, as we talked about with those job titles for internal comms and external comms, lean into your biggest strength and you'll appeal to the roles that you're most suited for. You can't control who looks at your CV. I mean, maybe someone looks at your CV and thinks, we don't want another middle-aged white bloke called Greg. We'll just say there are more suited candidates. Nothing I can do about that. And you'll never know. You might assume. But, putting your best foot forward with a carefully articulated CV and LinkedIn profile that plays to your best strengths for the job you're most suited for me, is the best step forward. As for customization, you're speaking the language of a vacancy, but it shouldn't ever take too much time.
I think from my experience of working in-house in a variety of organizations, the organizations that had the most successful recruitment processes were those organizations where the differences between hiring manager, recruiter, and even the external recruiters, a lot of work would be done to align them with our thinking. Where they were closely aligned, recruitment tended to work.
Absolutely. But that's not the case in most places.
It's not the case in a lot of places, and it's not the case when when someone in an executive role cuts and pastes a job description and it goes down the pyramid, and it ends up with a recruiter who's going to have to use that as the initiation of a search for candidates, and it's not accurate to the discussion that's taking place between that executive and the recruiter or the recruiter's boss. So I think it's a very valid point. It's not an easy one to solve, Malcolm. But in my experience, a good candidate, and I'm arguing against myself a bit of it on the idea of tailoring CVs, but a good candidate looks like a good candidate to just about everybody.
Absolutely. It's the same for anything in a job search. It's the same with interviewing. I often get asked, like, what exactly do they like in an interview? Because I want to make sure I give them that. But that's not the way to interview, because if you're putting someone false across, then that false person's the person who might get the job. Whereas if you concentrate on putting your best self across, what will be will be.
And it works both ways. And the candidates, I'm sure, are largely aware, but I have had recruiters asking me, and I've been in meetings where hiring managers have asked questions, but they're about to go into an interview. Should I mention this or should I not? How do I answer this question? Well, the answer always is honestly. If there's a cultural question being asked or a career question being asked, you answer it as honestly as you can, because if you sell something that is inaccurate in the interview process, you're going to live with that for the next 3, 4, 5 years. And it's the same way that if you go into an interview trying to be the best candidate rather than the best version of yourself, you're going to end up potentially having to imitate yourself into this made up persona for some considerable time. And that's when I think probation periods go wrong. So it's not about acting. It's not about acting on either side of the fence. It's best example of yourself and the most honest example of the organization you work for if you're an interviewer. I have seen some terrible things happen in interviews, I must admit, and I'm not going to go to them now, but I'm sure people have experienced a few of them themselves.
I mean, document-wise, most recruiters will have one question, which is this person qualified to do the job? And their skill level as a recruiter will inform the quality of the answer they get from that. But ultimately, it's whether or not is it worth contacting that person about the role, and that's what you have to cater for. When I receive applications or I'm looking for people on LinkedIn, the question I ask myself is, should I call them? And the reason I wouldn't call someone is if there are hard reasons that that person isn't suitable for a role. So again, it's just about quality of information. There's other stuff that goes on behind the scenes, like bias and discrimination, but it's nothing we can do about it, except, for example, with age, make age a strength rather than worry about it.
And I think the key issue for the vast majority of people who are in an extended job search is they lose faith in themselves, the market, and recruiters. And there's a difference. There's a really fundamental difference between internal and external recruiters, because the person most qualified for the role for an external recruiter is almost exclusively informed by the job description, whereas an internal recruiter, it's informed by experience of the individuals in that team, the way they work, the individual priorities of a hiring manager, etc. And that, so I think there is a greater level of personal recruitment. Is this the right thing to say? Yeah. When you're internally, when you're externally, you're trying to satisfy a job description. You may not have met the hiring manager, and that is often the case. And the hiring manager will have their own opinion as to who's going to be successful in their team, which may not have actually communicated through into the job description. So it does make it very difficult.
I think one thing that's worth highlighting is that it's kind of equivalent, the way in which I played around with search terms and the way in which we've seen those results, to how an applicant tracking system would manage a high volume of CVs. So all the data's there when we had 4,100 results, but there's no way I was going to go down to page 41 or however many results there was on a page to have a look at the last people, just in case. I filter it down to a manageable number, and that's the same for applications. So when you see 400 applications, how can we filter that down to a manageable number? Well, one of the ways in which we do that's through knockout questions. So do you have a work permit, or will you require a work permit? Can you commute to the location? Or companies do you have three years experience in a technology that's existed for 2? But that's why they're used. It's to create a manageable number of viable candidates. It's not actually to discount people who can do the job. Unfortunately, bad behaviour does get in the way at times.
It does. I once worked for a very senior hiring manager who would not, if he had his way and his preference, would not have hired an individual who had an affiliation for a certain football club.
Well, that's very sensible. West Ham, of course.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about that. But anyway, so a straightforward question from Phil. Do recruiters in our network immediately receive a notification when we activate open to work? I don't know the answer to that.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, maybe there's some advanced filters in the higher levels of Recruiter where you can put criteria up and get flagged up if someone's turned it on. I think it's more likely that you turn up in some of these additional tools here, like recommended matches. I don't know if I'll be able to do that here because I haven't done enough of the search, where it starts to flag up people that might be of interest. Because we just messed around with 3 different types of jobs, it's going to have some really strange results there. But I don't think that's the case. Or there are certain triggers, such as if you follow a company and you apply for a job, you can see that that person's done it. You can see that people have applied previously for vacancies. I think on higher levels of Recruiter, you can also see people who have looked at an advert but not applied for it, which would actually be quite a valuable resource for me, because there's a reason people aren't applying for it, and therefore can I fine tune. I found a candidate through CV Library by doing that who was quite good. So there are ways of manipulating it, but ultimately I think it's getting the basics right. You need to be findable and you need to be credible.
I think Malcolm's brought up, we're beginning to lift up stones now, but this I think would be a really good subject for a future Job Hunters Help Desk. It's why I wish I could still have verbal conversations with someone on the phone at a coffee shop or in their office before you apply, or perhaps that's still the secret job market. We haven't got time to go into the secret job market. I got a job years ago because I personally knew a consultant who offered me a job. I think there is definitely an argument that we should be running as a session on the Job Hunters Help Desk about effective networking.
Well, absolutely, but
I think that's really, really important.
Get secret job market out of your mind. And have a discoverable LinkedIn profile that converts, because that's how you access jobs that aren't advertised. But there's not a secret jobs market. It's how people recruit. And people recruit through, old school headhunters probably have a little black book for really senior vacancies. If you can get on that little black book, then great. But if you can't, then there's probably not much you can do about it. But the way in which companies fill jobs without advertising are through sourcing on LinkedIn. And that's what we're talking about today, are through looking through their ATS for previous applications for common skill roles, because it's a valuable resource, are through their existing network. So, building that network is really important. So it's those, as I call them, channels that are more important than the secret jobs market. Because if you get the channels right, you access every job that's available.
I think we could do with dropping the secret jobs market has become quite insidious, and it's now embedded in our.
It's an outcome, and outcomes are out of your control. It's the steps that matter. So these really boring steps to getting your LinkedIn profile is far more valuable than worrying about the jobs that you haven't got access to because someone's hiding them.
And I have met a lot of people with questionable intellect who've done my job and been recruited, etc. I've never met anyone who's stupid enough to say, I need to recruit someone for a role, but I think I'm going to keep it secret. Now that never happens. So it's not a secret job market. It's just an alternatively recruited role.
Some of them aren't ever going to be available to you. I mean, I was doing business development yesterday, and I was having a look at a company. I was like, how did that person become managing director? And then I had a look at company's house, and it's his dad's company. Good luck getting that job.
Well, I worked with my mum for years. I had a job title I never deserved, so I can see how that happens. But I do think that we need to really think about. I think what we've talked about today is a really, really important channel. but it's a channel in a multi-channel strategy about finding work, talking to people who are employing people, etc., etc. And I think that we need to. Well, LinkedIn is incredibly important and never underrated. It is a part of that broader channel that Malcolm is talking about, which is, there is still networking. I spoke to a very well-respected LinkedIn guru who said, Simon, people have forgotten the primary purpose of LinkedIn is to have one-to-one conversations. It's to motivate one-to-one conversations. And everything that Greg's done today is a step towards a one-to-one conversation.
And actually, some of the things that we didn't do, which is how recruiters maybe unfairly discount people to reduce that number, is some of those filters like industry, for example. You may have the best LinkedIn profile in the world, but if you work in food manufacturing and they want industrial machinery, then you won't come up in their searches because they've specified that. Might not be fair. You could probably do the job, but that's just how recruiters work.
And I think there are two things that we have to be honest about the market that we're in at the moment. A, there are not enough roles for the number of people looking for roles. That is always so. We have to get ourselves as job hunters into the upper quartile of our market. If there are 2 million people looking at 1 million jobs, we've got to get into that top million. And secondly, there are some jobs that we will never get. Disappointingly, I will never become manager of Liverpool Football Club for so many reasons that and we just have to look at roles and be honest. And when the market is tight and there is, it's candidate rich, there are more candidates than there are roles, the likelihood of someone being very closely aligned with the role that you're only 50% aligned with in the same talent pool, in the same funnel, is really high, and it increases with how candidate rich market becomes. So we have to get our job pairing right. We have to get our job search right, so we're applying for roles that we can do, that we want to do, and we're very well qualified to do, and we become in that upper quartile. I think what happens when markets get tough is people start applying, and I saw someone on LinkedIn yesterday saying they'd applied for 200 roles in the last 2 weeks. There just weren't 200 roles on LinkedIn that they were qualified for in the last 2 weeks. They got to the spray and pray type mentality of job search, and I don't think that works. I just don't think. I think it's the tighter the market gets, the better every application that you're responsible for should become. And I think that's the way people get jobs, is by putting in very high quality applications, not an awful lot of applications. But that's government orange box.
Or just make sure you're qualified for the job and make sure you can show how you meet the essential requirements. And if you can't, then maybe you're not as qualified as our applicants. It's unfortunately simple as that.
So someone has just joined. There will be a recorded version of this that appears on my LinkedIn. I think this is
same link. You'll be able to, as soon as we finish, you'll be able to watch it from the start. Or you can join the 2 subscribers, including me, on my YouTube channel.
I think that would be a good place to look at it. So it is around, and it'll be around for some time. So that's it. One thing I really liked, Adam's just said he's just finished reading your book, Greg. So that should not go unnoticed.
Thank you very much for buying it.
That's the guy who got the book. This has been really interesting, and I think it has answered an awful lot of questions, and we've seen people helping each other, and people also towards the end of the chat now going away and say, well, I've got some jobs to do. I need to go and sort out this, or I need to sort out that. And that's exactly what we're here for. So it is very beneficial.
I'll just be back in 2 secs.
Okay. Just have a look at Adam. Let's put this up from Adam. First of all, Adam, in Greg's absence, I'd just like to say thank you very much for playing such a big part in today's help desk. And I know you, Greg, did quite a bit of work before today and behind the scenes, so I'm very grateful for that. But you've asked, I have a question on this. As you saw, I have 18 months as a data person, but far more experience in other engineering roles. Sometimes I apply to junior roles, especially if they list 0 to 4 years experience, but I fear I get rejected on my work history. I think that is again, it is a symptom of the market we're in, is that people begin to apply for jobs that they were qualified to do a few years beforehand, so they're going for those less qualified roles. What
I'd suggest, actually, well, Adam and I have kind of been chatting anyway, but I would deprioritize some of your earlier experience and add additional information, especially around context and particular achievements. And we talked about, I'm sure he won't mind me saying, his ADHD and how that enabled him to access his superpower in his job, and perhaps some of the things that he really excelled at in his last role, because I think especially with that kind of approach to it, you can pick up skills really quickly. So that 18 months of experience to a Luddite like me could be about 25 years experience if I ever get there. So I think you should really focus on the stuff that you can do and the job that you want through your skills, your achievements, showing that context. It's the best thing you can do. I mean, the earlier experience does help because it's part of your career journey, but it's less relevant.
And I would say, Adam, that you're working with one of the best recruiters that I've come across. So that's first tick in the box. But if you have that challenge of falling, and there's the book, and falling between two stools, as it were, I think some work in that other job market, we won't use the word secret, the other job market, where you begin to have conversations with people and just ask them the question, be honest, ask them a question. I'm struggling with this. What are your thoughts? And build conversations with people. I think a lot of people are hired. They don't shout about it so much, but a lot of people are hired because a hire comes at the end of a conversation, and that certainly happened with a number of my clients over the last 3 or 4 years in some tough markets. So yeah,
I thought I'd just highlight something really quickly, which was how I'm writing my book is I'm scribbling the current version every time I've got new ideas, such as conversation with Adam around today's session, and also my post the other day on the location. But it's 300 pages and it's not enough, and that's the problem with a job search. It's so complex. There's so many moving parts. Ultimately, it's the market that's the problem, and you could just do exactly what you're doing right now. If the market picked up, that would get you what you need.
I love Martin's comment, and this guy knows what he's talking about. Too many people are looking down the market in this economy. A little ambition shines through. I think that's true, with the only caveat is that you need to be talking to the right individuals in an organization with the right mindset for that to work. But I think definitely look up, not down, and make your case for looking up. I think that's what someone like Martin would help. There was a question here, straightforward question from Linda, just before we finish. Does LinkedIn filter applications before they get to the hiring company? That's another stone we're lifting up.
But by hiring company, do you mean recruitment agency? So employers can hire directly. So you've got talent acquisition managers who will manage that, as Simon and I have both been, who will manage that recruitment internally. And we might use things like Recruiter or other tools to find, or even just our own applicant tracking system to find candidates, especially in this market. I think the problem with so many applications is that companies are scared to advertise, because who wants to spend hours and hours going through hundreds of applications, even with filters, with the threat that none of them might be suitable. Whereas, as we've seen through LinkedIn Recruiter, you can specify a search and get a curated list that you can contact. And if you've got a good message, which unfortunately most recruiters don't use, that can start good conversations. So to answer the question, that might happen, but if they've advertised, they'll consider an application if it's qualified.
Yeah. Just this comment, and I think, Adam, have a conversation with Greg about, I don't think job hunting is a full-time job. So I'm just curious.
I agree with you.
Now, I think it's about organising your time and having time that's dedicated to job hunting, and within that time block, having some targets you want to achieve with your time. So if you work, I work in 45-minute time blocks. If you work in 45 minutes, have 1 or 2 achievements that you want to come from that time. So you move in, you have a break, then I go and fail to play my guitar, which I've been trying to learn for 14 years now. When I come back, I'm in a better mindset because I've achieved what I set out to do. I think a lot of people I talk to are going into extended periods of time, and they can't tell you at the end of the day whether they, or the end of that hour or 2 hours, whatever, whether it's been successful or not, because they didn't set measurable smart targets for themselves in that time. So
I think the better way to look at a job search rather than a full-time job is that you're running the business of your job search. So you don't get any revenue other than the job that you get at the end of it, which is because you are the product that you're selling. And that's what what I've written about in the book, Adam. So I don't know why you said it's a full-time job. You should have said it's running your own business.
You're getting to that CEO of your own job hunt type.
But when you run a business, you have to have a business plan, and that's what we talked about last year. You got to have a plan. You got to measure the steps that you're taking, and you got to realize that you can do all things right and not get any revenue at the end of it. But ultimately, the big difference between running a business and a job search is you just need the one job, and of course you need to be lucky to have a job that sticks, because that's also the nature of the market.
And planning is so important. Writing it down is so important. I've had clients who have come to me and they have a more detailed plan for their next holiday than they have for their job hunt. And I mentioned this before, and I mentioned just quickly again, there's international research in New Zealand, I think, that would suggest that you can be 42% more likely to fulfill your targets and hit your targets if you write your plan down, make your plan real for you, make your plan real for other people. Talk to your immediate family, friends about what your plan is. Let them know that you don't go to the pub on Wednesday lunchtime, even if you're out of work, because that's one of the times that you do this or you do that. Write it down and share it with other people. I think is quite important. We've got quite away from LinkedIn now. We will be back again. It's now coming up to 2:30. We will be back again next Tuesday, and we will let you know what we're going to talk about sometime between now and the weekend. So
we could argue about customizing CVs if you like.
We have I think a conversation about CVs would be particularly because we do have that variance of opinion, although we agree on a lot too. So we'll make the next session, which is next Tuesday, a CV, an open house on CVs, answering every question you've got, trying to agree in the most positive way that we can on the things that we don't agree on, but we'll do that next time. That'll be at 1:00 next Tuesday. That's sorted. We're for once we now have a very clear plan. I'll write it down. We'll be.
We could market the event tomorrow. Well. Even
we could go early, couldn't we? I'm just writing it down, so I'm 42% more likely to achieve it. But we'll do that next week. We complete on this LinkedIn process. I hope it's been beneficial. If you've walked away with one or two things that you've learned, more importantly, make sure that you then apply them to your job search. So learning is one thing, but doing is another. I hope it's been useful. And Greg, thank you so much. I mean, Greg hasn't been feeling his best today, so to bang through this for over an hour and a half, I think, and keeping his head in gear has been really impressive. So thank you very much indeed. And as Sri says, good luck to all job hunters. We all need it at the moment, but thank you very much.
Great week.
And we will be back here at 1:00 next Tuesday, and we're going to have a Martin, I'm sure you'll join us. Martin's just going, I don't know how many oohs there are in that particular comment. It's an opportunity. Martin, we can even ask Martin to come on board and have a chat with us, because he's a very interesting man from what I can see from his posts. We'll be with you next Tuesday. Look forward to it. Thank you very much for being on board today. And if you any further questions, put them on the event page. If you want any more information, Greg's more likely to supply that than me on this point. But
might be tomorrow.
And Linda, I'll send you the breakdown from stuff that Greg looked up for you. I've already got it in my LinkedIn. We'll see you soon.